back to the 13 Films of Halloween on Filmmaster Reviews. I'm Adam J. Let's talk about Cloverfield. I'm really not a fan of Cloverfield. Not that it was the worst movie or anything. It's really not even a bad movie upon rewatching it. It just really did nothing for me, personally. The found footage thing got on my nerves, the monster wasn't that interesting, and the characters, to me anyway, ranged from bland to annoying. I just never cared for the film, but by God did I love 10 Cloverfield Lane. With a great setup, a likable lead, a haunting atmosphere, and John Goodman giving one of the best villain performances I've ever seen, 10 Cloverfield Lane was a deliciously horrifying experience. So when Netflix decided to announce a new Cloverfield movie during the Super Bowl last year, I was intrigued, but took my time actually watching it. The movie was available to watch after the Super Bowl on Netflix streaming, and the responses were almost universally negative, so I was hesitant. To date, I haven't met many people who liked it, and after actually seeing it, yeah, I can kind of see why. Whereas Cloverfield got on my nerves for the reasons I mentioned earlier, the Cloverfield Paradox got on my nerves for a whole mess of other reasons. The Cloverfield Paradox honestly feels like two different movies. One terrible, one fine. The story is about a group of people in space who manage to enter a parallel universe and have to figure out what's going on in order to get back home. And randomly plugged into all of this are random references to the other two movies, more in particular the first one. Now here's the thing, while I never really cared for the first film, the second one actually gave me a much deeper appreciation for it because it made me realize that they're going the route of an anthology series. Keep in mind, the Halloween series failed to do this back in the day, so the fact that Cloverfield succeeded where something like that failed was exciting. The thought of the series being kind of a modern-day Twilight Zone in movie form was pretty badass. There were so many possibilities for cool horror and sci-fi based stories under the Cloverfield name. The Cloverfield Paradox, trying to connect as much as it can, feels not only needless, but it kind of takes away the dignity of the other films. I mean really, there's no reason to connect them. I feel the same way when American Horror Story tries to connect shit. It just makes things more complicated and confusing than it needs to be. That being said, when the Cloverfield Paradox isn't trying to connect back to other films, it's not bad. It's actually an entertaining sci-fi story. Yeah, it's a bit derivative of other works, but it's certainly not bad. The acting is pretty good for the most part. Elizabeth Debicki is especially awesome in this film. The tension is there throughout much of it, and even some of the drama is nice. The special effects are also pretty damn good for a movie that's straight to Netflix. But when it tries to connect back to the other Cloverfield movies, it feels tacked on, unnecessary, and incredibly forced. It ruins what was otherwise a pretty decent sci-fi flick. If they had just stuck to the story with no connections at all, I feel this movie would have had a much better reception from fans and critics, because it could be viewed as its own thing. But as is, the Cloverfield Paradox is a huge mess, and actually has other things from the first film not make any sense. The timelines feel off, and other things just feel out of place. For example, the monster from the first film is now taller than the clouds for some reason. I've heard people argue that's because this is another other universe, but if that's the case, then I have two maddening questions for you. One, why was this marketed as the film that would answer all the questions we had from the first movie if you aren't even really connecting to the first film anyway? And two, if this isn't the universe from the first film, then what the hell is the point of trying to connect this shit at all? I mean, the hell? I don't get this. What's your logic here? In the end, honestly, I feel like this was a good movie at some point before they decided to shoehorn in all this other Cloverfield crap. If this had just been another self-contained entry in the Cloverfield franchise with no connections at all, this would have been fine. Unfortunately, it is really bogged down by all that stuff. It doesn't completely ruin the movie, but it certainly ruins its rewatchability with all of its maddening connections that really go nowhere and have us wondering why we even bothered in the first place. I'm giving the Cloverfield Paradox a C+. Again, it has enough good things for me to recommend it, despite the obviously shoehorned scenes. I would say give it a watch. It may surprise you, it may infuriate you. For me, it kinda did both. Thank you all for watching, and please join me for the rest of the 13 Films of Halloween right here on FilmMaster Reviews.
Whatever you're doing, stop.